For a planet to recognize the injustice of what had happened to Bonnie was quite amazing, really. And there's this knock on his door, there's this diminutive woman with the flaming red hair saying, "You're singing my song." And he was taken aback by it. And he did the right thing. He helped her, he used his influence, and he got recognition for her that the song is actually all her and nobody else.
We're totally booked.
Rock and roll!
Well, I think I'll leave you to your reading.
Little Hand says it's time to rock and roll.
Rock and roller!
We are totally booked.
Welcome back to Booked on Rock, conversations with authors, musicians, and insiders revealing the stories behind classic rock's greatest songs, albums, and artists. And if you enjoy the show, you'd like to support it, you can sign up for the Booked on Rock Backstage Pass on Patreon for just $5 a month. You'll get every episode commercial free before everyone else. Just use the link in the show notes or visit bookedonrock.com. Now, on to our guest, a key figure in the folk music boom of the late 1950s, Canadian-born singer-songwriter Bonnie Dobson wrote the folk classic Morning Dew in 1961. But after another artist wrongly claimed co-writing credit, she spent decades fighting to reclaim the song that became a standard for everyone from the Grateful Dead to Robert Plant. Author John Einarson joins me to discuss Take Me for a Walk in the Morning Dew, the remarkable story of Dobson's career, her influence on folk music, and her long battle for rightful recognition. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Eric. Nice to be here.
The introduction opens with Bonnie's triumphant return alongside Robert Plant in 2013, then works backward, making it feel almost like the final scene of a film, a great movie, before revealing how she got there. And a great moment in the introduction is Plant admitting that he had no idea Bonnie had actually written Morning Dew until she literally knocked on his door. Can you talk about this story?
Yeah, I just absolutely love that story. And Bonnie enjoys telling it as well, because she lives in Primrose Hill in kind of a bit of North London. And he has a house, he has many. And he's spending a lot of time in North America nowadays, but he has a house, just about 2 streets over from her in Primrose Hill. And yeah, he had, in interviews with him, he talked about how he was very much aware of the song, going back to the late 60s, and how John Bonham played in a band that backed up Tim Rose, who's the guy that we're kind of going to be talking about, and how much he loved the song. He said he did it in other bands on his own as well. And then he covered it on an album of covers and credited it to Tim Rose. And that's the crux of really the whole story, is how Tim Rose was able to get his name on the song. And it went from being Bonnie Dobson to Bonnie Dobson and Tim Rose to Tim Rose, Bonnie Dobson to Tim Rose, period. And so she kind of lost control of it that way. And it was her battle to get it back. But what's funny, and I didn't really play this up in the book, is Led Zeppelin have a terrible record for stealing other people's music. I mean, I always think of Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You off the first Led Zeppelin album, which was written by Anne Bredon, who was a folk singer. Joan Baez recorded it on a live album, and that's where Jimmy Page learned the song, and it was credited to Anne Bredon. But then a few years later, Led Zeppelin do it, and there it's credited to Jimmy Page and Robert Plant. And Anne Bredon had to fight for years to get her name back on. And so what happens is it now says Anne Bredon, Jimmy Page, and Robert Plant, as if they were all sitting in a room together writing the song. And also stealing Willie Dixon songs and Howling Wolf and that sort of thing. So for Plant to recognize the injustice of what had happened to Bonnie was quite amazing, really. And there's this knock on his door, there's this diminutive woman with the flaming red hair, saying, "You're singing my song." And he was taken aback by it, and he did the right thing. He helped her, he used his influence, and he got recognition for her that the song is actually all her and nobody else.
It's a great story. And the title of the introduction is "Thank You for Helping Me Get My Song Back." And that isn't really about so much royalties. It's about identity, right? I mean, as you research Bonnie's life, did you come to feel that reclaiming authorship was ultimately more important emotionally to her than it was financially?
Oh, that's exactly right. It was, for her, it was, this is my property. I wrote this. And I just want to be recognized that I am the writer of it. It wasn't financially motivated. But you also have to keep in mind that Tim Rose was taking a percentage of the royalties on that song credits. So that was important, but always secondary. Bonnie lives comfortably. I mean, she still gets royalties from Morning Dew and other things that she has done. It was recognition that this is my song and not anybody else's, and that he had no right to put his name on it and take credit for it. And it's the credit for it that really is the crux of it all for her.
And she worked with you to tell the story for the book. What was your first conversation with Bonnie like? Did she immediately embrace the idea of telling her life story and the story of the song, or did it take time to earn her trust?
Well, there's a lot of history that goes into this book. I mean, I was first aware of Bonnie Dobson like in about 65, and seeing her on television performing with folk music in Canada, folk music songs, Oscar Brand kind of shows and that sort of thing. And hearing Morning Dew, which I think came out in about 63 or so on her third album. But I was aware of the story around it, and aware of the fact that it was a controversy involved. I mean, I became more aware of the controversy when, as a hard rock guitar player in '68, playing in a band that did the Jeff Beck, Rod Stewart version of Morning Dew off the Beck Truth album. And it said Tim Rose on it. And I knew it wasn't just Tim Rose, or it was Bonnie Dobson. And so that the whole story of it kind of started for me from there. And even though the Grateful Dead had recorded it a year before, I didn't come to their album until '68 after the Jeff Beck group one. And there again, you see Tim Rose in there as well. So I knew about her and I knew about her career. But when I was writing a book on Ian and Sylvia, who were very much a part of the folk boom of the late 50s into the mid 60s, and of course, Four Strong Winds is like Canada's unofficial national anthem. I interviewed Bonnie. I got a phone number for her in England from a friend. I called her up, said, I'm doing a book on Ian and Sylvia. You were a contemporary. You knew them back in the day. And she was lovely to talk to, very open, very insightful. And we kept in touch over the years. That was about 2009. And every few years, I'd give her a call and say, "Hey, how about a book? You have a story to tell." And I said, "Morning Dew is a song that's never going away. It's going to outlive you. It's going to outlive me. People are still going to be covering it. But you need to set the record straight on all of that and talk about your life." And she was, I didn't know at the time when I would talk with her, in those intervening years, that she was. I mean, her son took his own life. Her third husband died, and so she was dealing with all of these things and issues raising her children. So she kept saying, "No, I'm not ready. I'm not ready." But about, I guess, what are we, 2026, 2025? It was late 2024, probably December, I think. I gave her another call, and she was more open to it because she had gone through all of this and she felt it was kind of time. And it worked out well because I made arrangements to go and spend a week with her in London, and her album with the Hanging Stars called Dreams had just come out, and it was getting tremendous attention. I mean, it didn't sell a lot because it was a small label. It didn't have great distribution, but it was really getting great reviews and articles on Bonnie. So she was going through a bit of a career renaissance. So it's kind of like the planets aligned and everything came together, and it was the time to do it. And it was also important to her that the book not be all about Morning Dew, because there's more to her as a traditional folk artist and then as a singer-songwriter. I mean, she really developed into a very gifted songwriter, but a lot of that stuff nobody knows about. And it's a fascinating life. And whenever I'm doing books, I'm looking for the human interest story in it and the ups and downs that in someone's life. It's more than just a music story. I mean, that's why I write. Yeah, I wrote a book about Arthur Lee, and I wrote a book about Gene Clark, because these people have had fascinating lives. Ian, Sylvia, Randy Bachman in there too. So that's what really drew me to want to tell her story, and the timing was right, as they say, for her to want to do it. And she was a little trepidatious at first, sitting down with me, and I'm trying to take her through her life and asking pointed questions and insightful, and sometimes deep questions, of course. But she gradually warmed up to it, And after the 4 or 5 days that we had spent in her kind of kitchen/living room, going through this, she said at the end, this was a marvelous experience. Thank you so much for doing this. It really brought a lot out of me that I'd kept inside, but it also kind of rejuvenated me too. So, I mean, everything came out well. The book came out well. Bonnie's very happy with the book. I'm very happy with the book. And I think it tells more than just a music story. It's a life story.
That Arthur Lee story, boy, I'd love to talk to you about that book.
Anytime.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, one of the things about the Arthur Lee book was I first, he was passed away, of course. And I approached his widow through a friend, and she was kind of okay to do it. She said, it's time. But when we met in California to do interviews with her and all the other guys from Love and other associates, she said to me, Arthur tried writing a memoir. No one's ever read it. So she pulls this thing out of her drawer, and it's Arthur talking about his life and his career and love and all of that no one's ever seen. So it wasn't printable as it was. I mean, Arthur kind of defamed a few people in it. But
all right.
It allowed me, as Arthur would, it allowed me to have his voice in the book in ways that I wasn't just picking old interviews. It allowed me to, I mean, every other interview was new, but this now was new Arthur. And I think that's a real strength in the book, is having Arthur's voice talking about things in a way he never talked about them before in interviews.
And Robert Plant, a big fan of Arthur Lee.
Absolutely a big fan.
The first time I've realized that was when they did a tribute concert to Arthur Lee, like 20 years ago, right, I think right after he passed.
Right. Yeah, it was around the time that he was sick and going to be passing.
He was sick, yes.
Huge medical bills. And Robert Plant, Ian Hunter, and a number of other artists flew over on their own dime, rehearsed bands, and played the show. And all the money went to Arthur to help defray his medical expenses. He had no health care. Musicians don't have health benefits.
We'll let people know where they can go to find all of your books. But for this one, it includes not only Bonnie's recollections, but perspectives from people like Robert Plant and lifelong friends. How much detective work was involved in tracking down those voices? And was there any interview that surprised you the most?
Well, I always like to paint a broader picture, cast a wider net and a broader story. It's kind of like, I know how I feel about myself and the things that I've done, but how do others? How am I perceived by others and the decisions that I have made? And it really paints a broader picture, a wider picture, a more insightful picture of the subject, the topic, or whatever. So I always like to do that in all of my books, and it helps if you have the cooperation of the subject. Of course, with Arthur Lee, he was dead, and with Gene Clark, he was dead too at the time. Well, he hasn't come back. But Bonnie then had people she suggested I contact.
How many seashells by the seashore?
I know. Don't get me started. So she had a list of people, and they were all very open to talking about Bonnie. She's got a million friends all over the world. So that helped a bit. And, there are some people you got to chase after. But the other realization is that Bonnie's 85. She started her career in 1959. Many of her contemporaries, other than, say, Bob Dylan, they passed away. So that made it a little more difficult to do that. But if you approach people right and you tell them that this is a book that's really looking at the life of this wonderful person that you, the interview person, knew well, then they're open to talk about it. But I really wanted to talk to Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead. I mean, I would love to have talked to Jerry Garcia, but he's obviously been dead for a number of years. But sadly, Bob passed away before I got the chance to do that. And we were kind of going through various channels. I mean, he's not the kind of guy that you phone up and say, "Hey, Bob, want to talk about Bonnie?" He has a lot of these guys at a certain level of rock star fame have a lot of walls around them, and a lot of people who filter all of this out. But I was getting closer to him, and we were about to set something up through one of their emissaries when he sadly passed away. But I was fortunate to get Dennis McNally, who is the Grateful Dead archivist and writer of books, and he is involved very much in all the archival albums that come out. And again, as I say, he authored the book. And he was wonderful. He had tremendous insights about what Morning Dew meant to Jerry. He said, and I have it in the book too from Dennis, how there was some kind of a tribute to Jerry being put on, and I don't know if it was bands or just playing music or whatever, not long after Jerry died in San Francisco. And the organizers came to Dennis and said, what do we do for a closing song? We don't know what to do. And Dennis said, don't be silly. It's Morning Dew. This is Jerry's favorite song. And so they closed with that, whether someone played it or whatever. But it would have loved to gotten Jerry or Bob, but unfortunately, things happened that way.
That's how I discovered the song, the Dead version, Europe 72, then heard the Beck version, which is phenomenal. But there are some great versions. Devo.
Yeah, well, Bonnie doesn't like the Devo version.
Okay. It's quite interesting. I mean, I didn't hear it until just literally today, just going through a playlist of all the different versions. But yeah, a lot of different ones. One of the biggest surprises in the book is her childhood, which she lived in government housing behind a chain link fence. How important was it for you to establish that she wasn't simply a folk singer, but somebody who had actually experienced poverty and social inequality firsthand?
That was actually a revelation to me too, because various short form biographies of her over the decades have placed her growing up in Scarborough. Scarborough in Toronto is a, I know it's in England too. Scarborough in Toronto, it's a nice suburb, and it's nice homes and middle class and all of that. And so I went in with that. And she said, oh, no, I was born in an old army barracks just on the outskirts of Toronto, surrounded by chain link fence. They were former barracks during the war where soldiers were, lived, and they were mostly made of cardboard, and they were bug infested, sharing shower facilities and all of that. That was a revelation to me because I didn't know that. And she'd never talked about it before either. And I think it did inform her in many ways, inform the character that she is, because she came to understand what poverty was really like, and what doing without was really like. And there's lots of people who are very wealthy and they say, well, I'm for the poor people. I understand that. Well, no, you don't unless you've lived it. And she did live it. And more importantly, she got out of it. She managed to escape that poverty cycle that exists. And coupled with that too, her parents were together and apart. It was a very dysfunctional family. Her mother was an alcoholic. Her father was an avowed communist. So it presented a lot of problems that she overcame. I mean, she was class valedictorian when she graduated school, and she couldn't afford to pay for university, nor could her family. So she got a scholarship to go to the University of Toronto. Now, she didn't stay after her first year. Serendipitously, a music career, sprung up in front of her, and she took it. But one of the questions I asked her, and I think it's the answers in the book, I said to her, how did it feel standing on the inside of that chain link fence and looking out the broader world out there? And she said, it was like we didn't belong there. And when we take the bus home and the bus would stop by the army barracks places and the chain link fence and all that, the other people on the bus judged us. We were poor. We were trash. And that obviously had an impact upon her to improve her life, and good for her that she did.
And her father introduced her to protest music, Pete Seeger, Paul Robeson, yet she ultimately developed her own worldview rather than simply adopting his. How did you see the tension between influence and independence that shape her as both an artist and a person?
She's very, very stubborn. She is her own person. She makes up her own mind about everything. And her dad was smart enough to say to her, you don't have to be a communist. You don't have to be religious. You don't have to be this. You don't have to be that. Just choose what you want to be. And she grew up around communism, and he believed strongly in it, and was devastated years later, I guess, when we started to learn the reality of communist Russia and communist China. and was quite devastated by that because he grew up to believe it was utopia, it was ideal, it was paradise, it was perfection. And she questioned all those things. And she credits one of her elementary school teachers who said, don't accept everything, question it. Ask, go to the sources, find out what this is all about. But what's fascinating too is when she went to get an American green card, they had a dossier on her dad, and obviously from the RCMP. And so the Americans had information about her dad, and they had information about her being with her dad at rallies and things. And she had to really explain herself to American authorities in order to get that green card. And having that green card was so important to her. She never wanted to lose it because she would never have a chance to have a career without it. But what fascinated, what scared her was just that the RCMP had been following her dad for years, and her sister probably too, because her sister was involved even more so in communism and rallies and all that sort of thing. But she developed her own perspective on life, and that's the way she is. She's extremely well read. She's a news junkie, and she reads and watches and takes everything in, and then forms her own opinions on everything.
She could have been a journalist.
She could have been a journalist. She
An investigative mind, yeah.
She could have also been in prison for being a communist.
Yeah. One of the things that's interesting about her story too is maybe the younger people that are watching this or listening right now, they may not know about this, but in the early folk revival, writing your own songs was almost frowned upon. Folk artists are expected to preserve tradition, not add to it. How difficult is it for young readers to appreciate just how revolutionary somebody like Bob Dylan and eventually Bonnie herself really were?
Yeah, and you're right. You're correct with the word revolutionary, because folk music was, it started out as music of the people, because that's kind of a broader definition of folk music. But it was based on traditional music and music that told stories from the past, from history. And, it was educational. And it also inculcated some of the ideals of, the way things used to be in society and all of that. But you didn't write. You researched folk music. You dug it up, and even Bonnie went to Ottawa to study at the National Archives to find all these old songs that had been there, and songbooks that were passed around. She even got the People's Songbook, which was kind of marching and rallying songs and union songs and all of that, and that's how she started her career. And as you say, nobody was writing songs then, or at least not in any kind of a big way. I mean, she wrote a song called Ben's Lullaby, I think, on her second album. It was a little sweet little song for a little boy who was the child of a friend of hers. But she was not immune to what was happening in the world. And she was very much influenced by the movie On the Beach. And that's a movie, I think, from 59 or 58. And it's about, what is the world like after a nuclear holocaust? And how do people deal with it? And the key scene in the movie is the husband and wife, and they're about to have a baby, and it's like, well, do we want to raise the baby in this environment? What do we do? And all of this impacted on her. And again, a woman who had been following a career of traditional music ended up writing a song that really brought together all of the themes of her life to that point, whether it's about government, whether it's about society, whether it's about war. And the whole ban the bomb thing was happening at that time too. And just the idea of, what is a nuclear winter going to be like? So out of that, one night, out of a discussion with a number of other folkies, when she was in LA playing at it was the Golden Bear or the Ash Grove, that all of this came to a head when she went back to her where she was staying and wrote the song. And being someone who grew up with folk music that was traditional and not written, she phoned up a friend and said, "I've written a song," like puzzlingly, I can't believe it. And she said, "Do you want to hear it?" And so she sang it over the phone to her friend Janie, and said to Janie, "Well, what do I do with it?" And she said, "Oh, you're going to have to record it. The song is great." but she went back, she recorded that song, of course, and it showed up. She played it, from 61 on in her live shows. It was published in Broadside magazine, which was a mistake on her part. And it was recorded on her third album, but she continued the traditional folk route of traditional folk music. She always would record at least one or two French Canadian songs on her albums, and the folk songs that she researched and performed and recorded were songs that nobody else really knew about, and that's what made her interesting, was her choice of material. And she would arrange the songs herself too. So it's not like it was a revelation for her. Oh, I'm now going to be a songwriter. Because even then, like you say, Dylan was writing songs. I mean, Dylan changed the game for everybody. Woody Guthrie could write songs. Pete Seeger could write folk songs because they had gravitas and they had history. But you, the folkie playing at the bitter end this week on your acoustic guitar, did not have the right to write R-I-G-H-T, to write R-I-T-E, W-R-I-T, to write folk music. And again, when Dylan started that, I mean, that it took some convincing for people to accept that, because you had the traditionalists versus this new folk artist writing his own material. And once Bob Dylan gained acceptance, I mean, you even take his first album. Bob Dylan wrote 2 songs on that album. The other stuff was
yeah. That a lot of people say the second album is really his first.
It's absolutely for a number of reasons. He met Susie Rodolo, who's the girl on the front cover of the picture, and she became his muse. She got him reading books. She got him reading newspapers. I was fortunate to interview her shortly before she died, for the Ian and Sylvia book, and she was an absolute delight. But she said Bob didn't have any social conscience or awareness. But once he started reading the newspapers and reading books and educating himself, that's where the Bob Dylan we know of Blowing in the Wind, The Times They Are Changing, all your Masters of War, all of that came out. And the trajectory of original folk music just went up.
Bonnie had some memories of Bob Dylan. She's got some great stories in there. One is where he's typing what may have become Boots of Spanish Leather. He would tag along and go to an ale house. He pulled out his guitar. Bartender tells him you can stay, but the guitar has to go. I mean, he's an unknown, so they don't know who he's about to become. But also, she remembered a different Dylan from what was depicted, particularly in the recent film. Like he was almost like a stand-up comic on stage back in those days.
Yeah, he had apparently a lot more personality. I mean, it's too bad we don't have any of the live performances recorded of him. She said he was more fun, and he was more fun off stage too. Again, he was just like everybody else then. He was just a guy who loved folk music, who was, scrambling to get gigs like everybody else was. And he found his voice, as you and I both on that second album. But the story about him in the restaurant and the guy saying, you can stay, but the guitar has to go. I mean, we were sitting around, done an interview, and Bonnie talked about something. She said, I remember the time when and she just told the story matter of fact. And I said, Bonnie, that's gold.
Yeah.
He also complimented her on Morning Dew in passing.
The lyrics are walk me out in the morning dew. My honey, walk me out in the morning dew today. I can't walk you out in the morning dew. My honey. Also talks about hearing a baby cry. I heard a young man mourn this morning. So it's somebody that's waking up in the morning after a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, devastation. Yeah, nuclear bomb. And it's a dialogue. It's, I assume it's the woman talking first, and then the man replies, "I can't take you out in the morning dew. I hear babies cry." It's a dialogue between the two, the couple in the movie. That, I mean, she invented that. Of course, that dialogue didn't exist in the movie, but she took the context of it and wrote it in that way of discussing. Well, what do? We can't. Everything's changed. There is no morning dew anymore.
Right, because they want to go on as if life is normal, but it's not anymore.
That's
now
right.
It ends with, I guess it doesn't really matter anyway. So what do you make of the ending there?
It's very fatalistic. I mean, there is no world left. We're never going to have the life we had before. So what does it matter now? What future? We know it's kind of like saying, what future do we have? Now, anti-nuclear war songs didn't really exist in '61 when Bonnie wrote it. Protest folk music was really drawn around the civil rights movement, and the Vietnam War thing wasn't on anybody's radar yet at the time. So Bonnie was taking a topic that not many other folk singers had addressed in any way at all. That kind of separated her from everybody else. It is definitely a protest song for sure, without a doubt. But it's protest. Its protest is on a theme that remains. I mean, it still resonates today. You know, why is the United States in Iran? It, you know, ostensibly to end their ability to make nuclear bombs and blow everybody on Earth up. So the song has remained timely. You know, some of Bob Dylan's songs aren't as timely anymore. I think the times they are changing and blowing in the wind have stood the test of time, but many of the others have not. And you take a song like Buffalo Springfield, For What It's Worth, you know, there's something happening here. Stop, Hey, What's That Sound? That's a song that's tied to the 1960s. And it's not a song I mean, if you hear it, it's intended, whether it's a movie or a documentary on radio, it's intended to harken back to a particular period of time of protest and anti-Vietnam War and student protests and riots and that sort of thing. So it's hardwired to a period of time. Morning Dew isn't. Morning Dew has been able to remain important, significant, relevant ever since. And that in many ways is very sad. But the truth is still there, that we still live in fear of all of this.
What is it about the song that makes it so endlessly reinterpretive too? Because you have versions by the Dead, Jeff Beck, Robert Plant, Nazareth, and Devo, as we mentioned, all found something different in it. What is it about the songwriting that makes it so endlessly reinterpretive?
Well, that's the nature of the song in that the lyrics appeal. I mean, the lyrics and the theme generally have remained. I mean, we can talk about how Tim Rose changed the one line in it, but the message remains and the message resonates. But it's so open to interpretation because it's a very simple folk song. It's just Bonnie on guitar, and she's just finger picking chords. But the message is strong. So the message appeals to artists, but the arrangement that she has allows them to be able to arrange the song and the music the way they see it, the way they want it, the way they envision it. And of the almost 90 different, you know, cover versions of that song, they're so different, every one. I mean, Nazareth, I like their version. I also like their German version. I don't speak German, but it's, you know, to do that kind of thing. But when you look at the breadth of all these cover versions, the interpretations all change, but really only one of them goes back to the original, and that's Serena Ryder. She went back to the original opening lyric, "Take me for a walk in the morning dew." Everybody else, and even going back to the Grateful Dead, has it as "walk me out in the morning dew." And that goes back to Fred Neil in '64. And he was one of the first to cover the song. And he felt that "Take me for a walk in the morning dew" was too wordy. And he felt, you know, to get, you know, kind of the lilt and flow of the song, "Walk Me Out in the Morning Dew" fit better. And every cover since then, Devo, there's a heavy metal version from France somewhere, and all these different versions all use that. What that says is all these artists heard the song from probably the Grateful Dead, possibly Jeff Beck, and probably Tim Rose. They didn't hear Bonnie's version. They don't know Bonnie's version. They just know the cover versions. I mean, that doesn't take away that she wrote the song. She still wrote the song, okay? But it shows that the Grateful Dead, and I'm going to say Tim Rose, they're the ones that really spread that song around. Even that 4-note intro that first appeared on the Tim Rose version, I mean, you hear it everywhere, and almost every one of those cover versions that you mentioned you were kind of trolling through, they all have that dum da dum da dum da dum. which Bonnie never invented. I interviewed David Robinson, who produced it for Tim Rose, and he said, "Well, that was mine. I came up with that idea of those 4 notes." But
Okay.
that's I'm sure Tim Rose would say he did it, but that's universal.
There's one I heard of by Lulu, which I thought was great, and I never heard it before. It's got xylophone on there.
It's got marimbas. It's got a horn section.
Or is it xylophone that I'm hearing?
No, marimbas.
It's
marimbas are the wooden ones.
Lulu. Okay.
It's bizarre. It's really bizarre. And who had a hand in that arrangement was John Paul Jones.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that when he was a studio musician?
Yeah, he arranged Lulu's records.
What year would this be?
67.
It's 67. Wow. Why do you think the Dead version has become the definitive one? Is just something about Jerry's interpretation of it?
Yeah, I think so. But also the fact too that there were Dead fans all over the world.
Sure.
Everywhere. And they would have picked up on that song from the first album. But as you say, you got it off of the live album in 72. The Dead recorded that song either live or in a studio 4 times. So it's never gone away. So you can have young people picking up on the Dead now from some live albums from even the 70s or 80s where they'll hear Morning Dew, and they'll hear it that way. So they have, and Bonnie very much acknowledges this too, they have allowed the song to continue, to be heard generation after generation. Whereas not Bonnie's version has that. Bonnie's version hasn't gone as widespread. But the Dead took that song and made it, I guess, popularized it, made it more relevant. And, again, because of their spread of influence all over.
Is she thankful for that?
No, she credits the Grateful Dead absolutely.
Yeah.
For what they did to bring that song to a much wider world and keep it resonating and relevant. Oh, absolutely. And she likes that. She went to see the Grateful Dead when she was living in Toronto, back in Toronto in around 67 or so. They came and played. But that night they didn't play Morning Dew.
Oh.
But she did. Tom Constantine, I think his name is. He played keyboards. He was a second keyboard player at Pigpen in the Grateful Dead in the mid to late 60s. And he played live, did that song live with them, a gazillion times. But a few years ago, he put together a Dead kind of a tribute band, and Slick Aguilera from Jefferson Starship and a few others are all in this band. And they came and played in I think it was called The Other Dead or whatever they called themselves. And they came and played in London at a club, and Bonnie went, and they got her up to sing it. No rehearsal.
That's great.
Just do it. And okay, there's another guy who I wanted to get a hold of, but he's very, very sick, and I'm not sure how well he is now, but he was very, very sick at the time. You have to, when you're doing these books, you have to live with those kind of things. Well, I'm not going to get to so-and-so, so let's try somebody else.
John Einarson is the author of Take Me for a Walk in the Morning Dew. Do you think Bonnie had any idea when she finished that song that she had created something that would outlive the folk revival itself, become part of the rock canon, or was it just another song in her repertoire?
She absolutely had no idea. I mean, she knew it was a good song. She felt strongly about it and felt confident about it, but no idea that she's like, 60 some odd years later, you and I are talking about it.
Yeah.
That song is still around, and guaranteed that sometime in the next few years, someone else is going to record it. They're going to stumble across it, maybe the Devo version or maybe even a Lulu version. And they're going to say, we
haven't mentioned the Almonds for the Greg and Dwayne. I think it was the Almond Joys at the time, if I'm not mistaken. That's my brother was introduced to the song through that version. It's interesting.
And that's a good version. And that was recorded tracks that they recorded before they became the Allman Brothers.
Right. It's like on their box set, I think, is where you can find it. I have
so
that.
The song just keeps rolling along. But she had no idea. And when she thinks about her career in perspective, a lot of it is serendipity. A lot of it is she never really had a master plan. She never schemed to do this and do that. Things just happen. And with Morning Dew, things just happen. Now, if the Grateful Dead Well, I'll start with Fred Neil. If Fred Neil and the Grateful Dead and then Tim Rose had never covered it, we wouldn't be talking about Morning Dew. It just would have been a song on a folk singer's album. You know, she did it on her live at Folk City, Gurry's Folk City in 1963. It just would have been there and lost, there and gone. Oh, it's a great song. Maybe if you happen to have the album, but you'd be hard pressed to find someone today who does have that album any longer.
The Booked on Rock podcast is part of the Boneless Podcasting Network. If you're a fan of classic rock and classic film like I am, go to boneless.lovable.app to find over 20 great shows there. That's boneless.lovable.app, or just go to bookedonrock.com, the Boneless Podcasting Network. It is what you want it to be. Listen with confidence. The Tim Rose story, let's get to it now, because this is where it gets interesting. She never met Tim Rose, yet he receives co-writing credit on one of the most famous songs of the year. Walk us through exactly what happened. How did that happen that he ended up being known as the guy who wrote it?
Well, she never met him face to face, but she did interact with him from a crowd.
I was going to say confront him, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, she did kind of confront him from a distance anyway.
Right.
Tim Rose had been in a folk group with Mama Cass. They were called the Big Three. And after Mama Cass floated around and then ended up in the Mamas and the Papas, Tim Rose put together a group called the Thorns. And they were a folk group. And they were actually touring Canada in '65 when Neil Young saw them. Neil Young and his band, the Squires, were playing in Thunder Bay, which at the time was Fort William. And Neil met Tim Rose then in the Thorns, and he thought that they were a really good folk act. He then got a solo contract to record an album. It may have been with Columbia. And David Robinson was I think it's Rubinson, was the guy assigned to produce it. And it's Tim that brought the song to the recording sessions. As David said, I'd never heard this song before. And Tim brought it in, and they worked together on the arrangement for it. So David knew nothing of the history of it. But when Bonnie wrote the song, she knew nothing about song publishing. So she didn't establish a copyright on that song. And she made the mistake of having Broadside magazine, which was like a mimeographed folk music newspaper, handed out in the village at folk clubs. She allowed them to print it. The music, someone transcribed it. She can't read music. And the lyrics before she copyrighted the song. So she left that door open. And then
she didn't have management at the time, did she?
No, and she knew nothing. She didn't have any financial advice or anything. Remember, she did traditional folk music, so she didn't know anything about publishing your own songs. And then Fred Neil then recorded it in '64. And when Fred Neil was going to record it, Jack Holzman, who owned Elektra Records, phoned up Bonnie and said, Fred's going to record the song. And Bonnie knew Fred from the village. And Jack Holzman said, Fred's going to record the song. Who publishes it? She said, I don't have it published with anybody. And so he said, okay, then we'll publish it under our own, Elektra's own publishing company called Nina Music. And Nina was Jack Holzman's wife. But at that point, it had already been made public on Broadside. Okay. So it's obvious that Tim Rose heard the Fred Neil version because he sings the "Walk Me Out in the Morning Dew" line, not "Take Me for a Walk in the Morning Dew." And Fred was the first to do that. So he heard that version, but he didn't look at the credit because Fred Neil credited it to Bonnie Dobson. But this whole issue of between 61 or so, or 62 and 64, when Fred Neil did it, the copyright was nebulous. It wasn't published at all. And so Tim Rose was smart enough to realize there's a loophole here. And I changed a line in this song, and I changed a bit of the arrangement. So I'm going to claim co-credit. And Bonnie didn't even know about that, for several years later, when she started seeing the song being covered by other artists and seeing this other guy's name, someone she didn't even know. She had no idea who Tim Rose was. And by that point, he had published it as Tim Rose with another publishing company. So you got these two publishing companies with this song, but before that song was ever published, she had made it public. So she left herself open for that, and she certainly admits her naivety cost her in the end. But that started the battle of her trying to regain control of that song. And as you and I know, on the Truth album, Jeff Beck, it just said Tim Rose. Even the liner notes, I remember, it's Jeff says something, we know Timmy does this better, but we think we do pretty good too. There was no bond. And as more and more covers, came up, more and more you'd see Tim Rose's name, and then you started to see just Tim Rose. And that I would probably venture to say that close to half or more of the cover versions that we've been talking about are credited just to Tim Rose.
Well, there's a story behind him in Hey Joe. Tim Rose and Hey Joe, right? I mean, that's the version Jimi Hendrix heard and said, hey, I want to record that. It's a very similar story, isn't it?
It is, but he got shut down quickly on that, and he probably got shut down by publishers of the song. And
Billy
Hendrix,
Roberts wrote that.
Yeah, that's right, Billy Roberts. And there was another song too, and I can't remember the name of it, something about "Come to Me, Belinda" or something like that. He also tried to claim credit on that one too. So he was fast and loose with copyright laws, and he knew what he was doing. But as more and more people covered the song and claimed it for him, there was a big ad actually the ad for Lulu's song in 1967 in one of the British, New Musical Express or Melody Maker, full page ad that said Tim Rose's recording, blah, 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 Tim Rose's Morning Dew. And increasingly, and as I said, probably more than half of the artists that covered this song over the decades saw it as a Tim Rose song and saw it credited as a Tim Rose song and credited themselves to Tim Rose. So he was getting half the royalties on that song because he claimed as a songwriter. So it was the fact that, Bonnie was still getting royalties, but she wasn't getting her full royalties because it's her song. She was giving half the royalties to some guy she'd never met who did not write the song. So it was really a battle for a number of years to get that settled. And she finally, really within the last 10 years or so, found a lawyer, a copyright lawyer in London, who took on the case. And again, at the prompting of Robert Plant, and got it straightened out that Tim Rose's name does not appear on it anymore. But Tim Rose died decades ago, and someone in his family, and Bonnie doesn't know who, and Bonnie's lawyer doesn't know who, someone in the Tim Rose estate is still getting money off that song, but he's not getting half.
25%.
25%, right.
Right. 75% she gets.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's, I wonder about Tim Rose. I mean, was this something in his defense? It's a fantastic version that he
yes.
does, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Was this something like nefarious? Or can we speak in defense of Tim Rose? Like, I don't know, was it just one of those things? Like, hey, I was just smart enough to know. Let me take publishing credit for it. Or should he have said, no, this isn't my song?
Well, he should have. Yes, he should have done that. Yeah. And was he nefarious in some way and said, I can do this? Yeah, but Tim Rose apologists, and I have some of them quoted in the book, they follow Tim's line, and he says, well, I didn't know who published it. I didn't know who wrote it. I just saw the song somewhere or heard it, and I just decided to do it. No, if he did this with other songs, especially with Hey Joe, once you can say, if he did it once, well, okay, maybe it's an error. Twice, 3 times, it was calculated to do that. And he got to the point of defending himself all the time when asked about the song. Oh, no, Bonnie and I are friends, and we share the copyrights on it.
There's a version on Spotify, not his original version, but one that he played live. And I thought it was interesting in the beginning. He says this is dedicated to Jerry Garcia. Now, I don't know if it was recorded right after Jerry passed, but it's just funny. Like, he's not even acknowledging her in that recording. He's dedicating it to Jerry Garcia. Wow.
Well, that leads to the confrontation that she had with him in the Half Moon or something club in Putney in London, where big ads, Tim Rose, famous for Morning Dew, playing at such a club. And she went with some of her friends and stood at the back. And interesting too, I didn't know this until I started interviewing some people who were there. They said there was a German documentary company there, and they had cameras. So they were filming Tim's show or whatever. And all of a sudden, this lady at the back says, "Stop playing my song. You didn't write it." And the cameras all swerve over to this red-haired little spark plug of a lady. And then Tim says, "Oh, come on, Bonnie." And he says, "Why don't you come up here and sing it with me?" "I wouldn't sing this song with you ever." And the cameras are sort of going back and forth between these two people having a fight in public in a crowd. But she stepped, and she'd had enough, I guess, by then. Especially too when by that point Tim was well into saying it was his song alone. He bought that whole. I mean, he swallowed the Kool-Aid on that one.
Yeah, good for her. She stood up for herself.
Yeah.
Yeah, she made the decision to leave behind a successful North American career and start over in England. Did you come away feeling she was running towards something, or a new life, or away from the music industry? Maybe she became disillusioned with it.
Nothing with the music industry at all. She met a guy she wanted to marry.
Okay.
A second husband, and he was from England, and she met him in Canada when he was working in Canada. And he went back to England, and she fell in love and followed her heart. So it wasn't a case of I just can't do this anymore, because she had just released actually a pretty good album, just called Morning Dew, Bonnie Dobson. And the producer was Jack Richardson, who produced Bob Seger and Poco, and he made his fame with the Guess Who, Bay City Rollers, on and on. He was a big producer guy, and he always liked Bonnie, and he wanted to make her music a little more contemporary. And so he got her away from the traditional folk kind of songs, and she had been writing, and she had a few songs that were decent songs. So he encouraged her to write. He brought in songs from other largely Canadian songwriters, and the album got good notices. And she then recorded another one called Good Morning Rain, which was her own song, literally months before she moved to England. And she kind of left Jack Richardson and RCA, because both albums were on RCA, kind of hanging, because when the album came out, she wasn't there to promote it or play, or do concerts or interviews or whatever. She was over in England. But Bonnie is a very romantic person, and she follows her heart, and that's the decision that she made. My heart is more important than my career. She was fortunate to kind of kickstart her career early on when she got to England, but it wasn't in any way motivated by frustration with the music business and all of that, because she really wasn't fully aware of, and she said she didn't become aware of it till she moved to England, of how much Morning Dew had been covered and how much Tim Rose had been claiming it and talking it up as if it's her song. So that really starts to happen when she's in England. But again, I just can't say it any other way. I mean, she was really following her heart.
Sure. Raised a family. Yeah,
that's it. She had 2 kids with this her second husband, and then they split up. So she was then, from about 72, 73 onward, raising the kids herself. And she would still be gigging. She'd have to go out, in some cases, drive all afternoon, play somewhere, and drive all night to be back to make the kids breakfast in the morning and get them off to school, that sort of thing. The BBC was a big help for her too. They brought her in often to make recordings, and the BBC paid really well for her to do that too. So she just managed to carry on and go along. She made more albums and developed her songwriting, and that's one of the things I'm pleased that. I'm pleased with myself, but I'm glad I did, was to include examples of her songwriting in the book, because I suspect there's a lot of people who don't know her other than maybe Morning Dew, and she became a very good songwriter, and she wrote from experience. She wrote from the heart. She didn't just make up a song. She had to write from experience of things that happened in her life, and I wish, and it's still my wish, I hope it happens, but I would love to have seen a compilation CD put together of her songs, of her material, because it's really evolved and become fabulous. And you get little bits and pieces of it on different albums. Some is on vinyl, some's not on CD, that sort of thing. It'd be nice to put something together that kind of came out around the same time as the book. Maybe it might happen, in the new year. But I would love to see that happen, because
that would be great.
She deserves to have this material heard, because she's more than Morning Dew.
Thanks so much for checking out the Booked on Rock podcast. If you've just found the podcast, welcome. If you've been listening, thank you so much for your support. And make sure you tell a friend, a family member, share on social media, and let people know about Booked on Rock. And if you do like the podcast, make sure you subscribe, give a 5-star review wherever you listen to the Booked on Rock podcast. We're on Amazon, Apple, iHeart, Spotify, Spreaker, TuneIn, and on YouTube Music. You can check out the full episodes on video, along with video highlights from episodes on the Booked on Rock YouTube channel. Find it at Booked on Rock. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. Days of Reckoning is that's a great song from 96. Now she returned to the business on her own terms at that point and writes and records Days of Reckoning, which is like a companion piece to Morning Dew, right?
Yeah, and she worked with Friedemann Witecki, who was a German musician, and he had a studio in Germany. They met in London, and he backed her up for a while. But she went over and recorded there, and it's a brilliant song. And I think she's kind of come to realize how brilliant that song is. It's one of my favorites. Good Morning Rain, I've since learned from another interview that I did, has been downloaded something like 200,000 times. She had no idea about, Spotify and that kind of music streaming. We know that Spotify pays, 0.0084 cents for every download. But she was just completely unaware of that, especially a song like Good Morning Rain wasn't a hit, wasn't a single. But obviously it's connected with people who have discovered it and spread the word. So again, these serendipitous things that happen in her life, and who would have thought?
Good Morning Rain, 2 million streams.
Yeah, and an 85-year-old woman, experiencing this career renaissance, certainly in the last few years. I mean, who knows how long it will go on. She still sings like a songbird. She sings every song in the same key, but that beautiful soaring soprano voice that's still there. It's not like she stopped singing. She continued to sing always.
Hey, how about a Robert Plant, Bonnie Dobson album, right? Like he did with Alison Krauss.
Oh, I think that he's better off with Alison Krauss. More longevity, maybe.
Yeah.
Bonnie's not as rootsy as Robert and Allison are. Listen, I mean, I wrote Gene Clark's biography, and Gene Clark's 2 sons, one of which has since passed away, they were absolutely thrilled when on that Raising Sand album, which was Allison and Robert, they did 2 Gene Clark songs. And they got to meet at a show. They got backstage to be able to meet him, and Robert Plant was thrilled to meet Gene Clark's sons.
That's awesome. And Bonnie considers now the 75%, that's her pension. And after she's gone, the money goes to her daughter.
Yep.
And the book ends with not her past, but the creation of a brand new album. Tell us about that and where Bonnie is at today. 85, still going strong.
Yeah, she is. And she's been doing some gigs lately back with the Hanging Stars, and they're kind of a alt-country, rootsy Americana kind of band. They've been compared to the Grateful Dead. They've been compared to the Byrds. And again, serendipitous. She had written some songs, and she wanted to get them recorded with a band. And a friend, Ski Williams, took her to see the Hanging Stars playing at the Betsy Trotter, which is a fabulous pub. I've been there to see music in London, and it's wonderful. We're actually going to do a book event there. Bonnie's going to perform.
Oh, great.
And she really liked them, and she got to know them. And so what she did, she hired them to rehearse and to go in the studio. She paid all the studio sessions, the costs, and paid them a salary because she wanted these songs, recorded not for any other purpose but her own. But as it evolved, the connections, the chemistry between them, and these guys are, they're in their early 30s, and she's in her 80s. But the musical chemistry just was so incredible together that they both realized there's an album here. And so that became, the Dreams album, which, came out 2 years ago. And as I said, got great notices everywhere. And it gathered together some of the songs she'd written previously, like Rainy Windows and Winter's Going. Winter's Going was Jarvis Cocker's favorite song. And it's Winter's Going that caused him to look up Bonnie to play at this show he was curating called The Lost Ladies of Folk Music, to come and perform for that. So you never know where these songs are and how they're touching people. But Winter's Going is a very difficult song for her, in that it's about the aftermath of her abortion. She never talked about the abortion. Even Her son, who since passed away, and her daughter never knew about it at all until she opened up about it when she was, doing the book with me, doing interviews and stuff. So some of these songs, some new songs that she'd written, it got a chance to put them together and put an album out, and it deserved better distribution than it got, because it's a very, very good album. So the few thousand people who bought it, they know what a treasure it is. And here's, she may record again with the Hanging Stars. Who knows? She's been performing live with them again. She's got a couple of them who are backing her on some of these book events that we're doing in London, including at the Betsy Trotter. So who knows what's going to happen? And she's open to anything.
One last question before I ask that, though, there's a quote that I want to read from Bonnie. She said, "It was never about the money for me. I just wanted recognition as the sole writer of that song." So do you think that history now has finally corrected the record on Bonnie's authorship of Morning Dew, or is there still work to be done to ensure that she receives that recognition that she deserves?
Well, I think she's now legally established that, yes. But as for getting the word out, I think the book will help, because the book is going to be, distributed worldwide. So it's going to help with that. But, all we can do is hope that in everybody's minds it's changed. And certainly anybody today who wants to go and cover Morning Dew will see that it's just Bonnie Dobson's name on there. So yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, the song's going to outlive her. It's going to outlive you and I. There's somebody 30 years from now who's going to record that song, but they're going to record it and credit it to Bonnie Dobson.
Yes, and the book is a huge help to that. And artists who are going to perform it live, just make sure you mention that it was written by Bonnie Dobson, right? That'll go a long way.
Fiery lady in red hair at the back yelling at you.
Might be there. Find the Booked on Rock website at bookedonrock.com. There you can find all the back episodes of the show, the latest episode in video and audio, links to all of the platforms where you can listen to the podcast, plus all the social media platforms. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X. Also, check out the Booked on Rock blog, find your local independent bookstore, find out all the latest hot rock book releases, and before you go, check out the Booked on Rock online store. Pick up some Booked on Rock merch. It's all at bookedonrock.com. The book's out September 10th, right? Okay, but people can pre-order it now. Take Me for a Walk in the Morning Dew. September 10 release date, but you can pre-order now through Amazon. You can also go to jawbonepress.com. There's a signed copy available from Rough Trade as well. Is that still?
Oh, I'm going to England at the start of September. And Bonnie and I will be signing tons of books.
Okay.
For distribution, but also for sale to the events.
And roughtrade.com people can go to and
Yep. They obviously won't have the books until September the 10th. By then I'll already be there and we'll have signed tons of books.
All right. And John, where can people find you and also your other books? Is Amazon the best place? Do you have a website?
Yeah, Amazon is there. And some of my books are out of print because it's been like 30 years. But what amazes me is the Gene Clark book is still in print. My Desperados, the Roots of Country Rock book, is still in print. My Buffalo Springfield book is still in print. And these books go back like 30 years. I have a Facebook site where I talk about music history every day. It's called John Einarson Remembers.
Okay.
And it's open. Anybody can come. But
also on Amazon, is your Neil Young book still there? You have a Neil Young book?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's still there and available. It's called Neil Young, Don't Be Denied, the Canadian Years. And it's all about his time in Winnipeg. I mean, he got to start here. And then in Thunder Bay and in Toronto. And then when it kind of ends when he heads off to California. But I remember saying to Neil, I said, how come there's never been anything written about your early years, in Winnipeg? And he said, because no one's ever asked me. I said, well, I'm asking. And he invited me down to his ranch, and we spent a great deal of time just sitting around. And I had him just in stitches remembering some of these stories and things about him. It's funny. No one ever thought he would make it. I mean, yeah, you talk to people today, say, oh, I knew he was going to be big. No, you didn't. No one ever thought he was going to be. He had a weird voice, thin and reedy kind of a voice. He was kind of an awkward looking guy, but he stuck to it. I mean, he really followed that dream. And as he said to me, I had to leave a lot of friends behind because I was so focused on music. That's the only thing that mattered. If you weren't supporting of what I'm doing, or if you didn't want to do what I want to do, well, I'd leave you behind. And that really is what his career is all about. Since playing in his first bands in Winnipeg in 1961, Neil has always been the boss. It's his way or the highway. And, when he's been in, like Crosby, Stills, and Nash, he's in, he's out, he's in, he's out. Buffalo Springfield, he quit 3 times because he wanted to be the boss. I also wrote the biography of the Buffalo Springfield, too. And I wrote it with Richie Foray, who was, he was kind of the guy in the middle between Stills and Young.
People go to Amazon.com. I'll put a link to your Amazon page so people can check out all of the books that you got there. John Einarson, thank you so much, man. This was awesome to have you on. I have a feeling I'm going to have you back on again. You got quite a few books here I'd love to talk about.
Eric, this was a treat because it's always lovely to talk to someone who knows what they're talking about.
And loves the topic, because you were saying you weren't sure if this was something that, I'd be interested in. I'm like, are you kidding me? I love this. This is right down my alley, man.
I've got you here. This book here. I don't know if it's showing it backwards or not. This book came out last year. It's called From Born to Be Wild to Dazed and Confused, Rock Music Revolution of 1968. The premise of the book is, why did rock change in 68 to a harder rock sound? And that harder rock sound would become the basis of what today we call classic rock. And how did that happen from psychedelic music before it? And who are the driving forces of creating this hard rock sound that we know today as classic rock? So that's out and still there.
Cool. Thanks so much, John.
My pleasure. Take care.
That's it. It's in the books.